Hello, everybody, and welcome to GlugNet. My name is Stephen Ball, and I'm the acting president of GlugNet. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome Matt Kelly Williams, who is going to be telling us about DevOps, specifically 10 things it is and 10 things it isn't. But before we get started with that, a few housekeeping items. First of all, a little bit about us. We are the Greater Lansing user group for .NET developers, based out of Okemos, Michigan, as pictured here. Our meetings are free and open to the public, held every third Thursday of the month. The best way to find out about what's coming out next is to go to meetup.com/glugnet. In addition to feature presentations, we are looking to integrate some lightning talks. So if you have a topic that you are passionate about and can give us a 10 to 15 minute talk, please let Joe Kunk or myself know, and we will get you scheduled. During tonight's presentation, we want this to be interactive, so please, if you have questions, feel free to jump off of mute and ask your questions. If you are not comfortable speaking up, that's fine. There is a chat feature that I will be monitoring. You could submit your questions that way. Otherwise, we just please ask that you remain muted so that we can all hear the presentation and enjoy it. And at the conclusion of tonight's presentation, there will be a survey available to all attendees. This is completely anonymous. We're just looking to get some feedback on the presentation that will be summarized and sent to our speaker so that he can use it for his future versions of this presentation. So if you would please consider filling that out at the end, that would be greatly appreciated. This evening, we have two sponsors, NIS Technologies, who is providing this go-to session, as well as the YouTube recordings, and the .NET Foundation, who pays the bills for the organization. As I mentioned, our meetings are usually recorded and posted to YouTube by Sam Nasser. You can find his channel at Sam Nasser MVP or by using the QR code on the screen. And some other meetups that you might be interested in. Our friends in Cleveland at the C#VB.NET user group, the Greater Lansing area for SQL Server, the .NET Study Group, or if you are in the Southfield, Michigan area, there is an in-person group called mi.net. I highly recommend checking that one out if you're in the area. But now it is time for our featured presentation.
Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is. May you have a good day. I say this because I'm sitting in not quite sunny because it's 4-something a.m. India at the moment, but here to talk this evening about 10 things DevOps is and 10 things DevOps isn't. There's a lot of confusion over what DevOps is, and hopefully we can clear some of that up without causing too much more confusion. You may have run into me at different conferences. There's a number of them that I am a regular at, but one of the areas, and I'd like to plug it real quick, down in the lower right-hand corner, the Sustainable IT Manifesto. I totally cribbed it off the Agile Manifesto, but it is a set of principles and practices for IT sustainability. And because of it, that's why I'm in India right now. So let's take a journey together over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Something that we can all share together and hopefully come out the other side with a shared experience. And we as humans do stories. Sitting around the fire, having the elders tell the story about how caveman Glunk, him and the saber-tooth, that one day, how they tangled up, and the saber-tooth tripped and broke one of its fangs, and so now they had that one fang, and that's how one fang got its fang. But stories are important, So let's take a journey together, spinning a story about, DevOps, and let's start off with what is. Let's start with the world, the way the world is, and let's move towards what can be, what maybe should be. So a lot of times nowadays, people have in their development and delivery cycles things that take forever. There are some companies that have what they call the release train. And if you aren't on the release train for that month, well, you get to wait until next month. And all of these things make it very difficult to deliver value to your customers, whether they be internal customers or external customers. Slow feedback. How many times have you worked on a project where you write code and then the testers might get to it 6 months later? Oh, and by the way, you're supposed to go live in 2 weeks. And who knows whether that code is still in the same state that it was when you did the initial check-in. I've seen all of these happen before, and it makes it very difficult and very costly because you have to sit and think and try and remember. And rigid blame. There's usually, when something goes down, somebody who the blame is put on. People are trying to move away from that with blameless postmortems and the like. People are even moving away from the term postmortem. Some people are calling them learning experiences. But let's see what could be. Fast delivery. CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous, some people say delivery, some people say deployment. I actually prefer the term delivery. And the reason I prefer delivery is that it has the idea that at any time you can deliver value. Now, your organization might decide that you still want to not push out changes in the middle of the day, but you are still able to deliver value. And it's all about delivering value. Fast feedback. You check in some code, some tests are run, you get immediate feedback. So you still most likely are knowing what you did in the code and can make changes without having to sit down, try and read, try and think back what you had done 6 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever. There is a concept that I like to call maintenance-driven development. And the idea behind maintenance-driven development is that you write your code as if you're the one who's going to get the call 6 months, 2 years, 5 years down the road at 3 a.m. when something's broken. Or, more to the point, the person who gets the call knows where you live. Additionally, have an environment that encourages play and experimentation. Part of the continuous delivery cycle, or continuous improvement, cycle, is that you're going to try new things. You're going to figure out what can we do better. And in a world where DevOps is done properly, you are encouraged to make improvements. And some of that requires play and experimentation. So let's shift back and look at some disorganizations. I'm sorry if any of this is triggering. It may very well be for people. It certainly brings back some less than happy memories for me in some ways. But let's start with the elephant in the room. DevOps is not a job title. Too many organizations, well, I started tracking DevOps positions posted to DICE and such back in 2014. And I did a site scrape of DICE and downloaded many jobs. And as a DevOps engineer, you will use ToolX, and we'll get more to that in a moment. But there's actually the principle that if you have a team, a dedicated DevOps team, you're doing it wrong. And so DevOps is not a job title. It's not a checkbox for a resume. It's not something to say, yeah, I do DevOps. Yeah, I can do this. It's not a team. Now, I understand that it can be easier in some ways for subject matter experts in a particular field or group to, for organizational purposes, report to a particular chain. However, even though they're loaned out and assigned to a project and in theory embedded, it still really doesn't work very well in my experience, because now you have manager X, team Y, and how do you juggle your responsibilities? As well as, how do people know, if you're doing a good job or not? The team can provide that feedback, but DevOps is really not a team. DevOps is a philosophy, and DevOps isn't done alone. Embedding a DevOps person or a DevOps engineer onto a team for a project doesn't solve the problems. Obviously, if you have an agile team that has people with a large number of skill sets, you're going to have people who are better practiced in some areas than others. Learning how to write good tests is a full-time job. Writing good tests is not easy. The amount of things that you need to know in order to be able to do some of the infrastructure, some of the scripting and so forth that might be considered part of DevOps, that also takes skills. But that said, sharing responsibility is one of the important things. I worked on a project at a company that we ended up putting the developers as being the first line contact if there was an alert that happened. If it was something that they weren't able to do, we would step in. But it was amazing how having a shared ownership, having a shared responsibility changed how the project worked together. There had been one developer who, I would set up an alert and it would go off. And he'd be like, that's annoying. That's obnoxious. I'm like, yes, it's supposed to be. And it was PagerDuty's song of a 6-year-old singing, something's broken, it's your fault, it's your fault. Are you going to fix it? Are you going to fix it right now? And of course it's obnoxious. Of course it's annoying because you don't want to hear that. But as we had a shared sense of ownership, as we had a shared sense of responsibility, people were like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand that better now. And far too often, I'm going to poke a finger at executives here, they go to a conference or they read an article and, oh, all the big companies are doing DevOps, so we have to do DevOps. I don't know what DevOps is, but we're going to do it. And this happens, with all sorts of technologies. It's not just DevOps. It's, it's AI now, or there's DevSecOps, there's FinOps, there's KitchenSinkOps. You name it, they've got to do it because it's the latest and greatest thing. So let's shift gears and take a moment to look at what might be DevOps done right. And there's lots of approaches, but here are some of the traits for organizations that are doing DevOps right. DevOps is a culture. It's a paradigm. It's a way of looking at shared responsibility, shared development, shared operations. You've got DevOps. And I missed an opportunity back 2012 or so. I started writing and talking about something I called Ops for Devs. Unfortunately, it didn't catch on, but I'm glad that DevOps did. But it's a culture, it's a paradigm, it's a way of looking at the world. It's not, again, a job title. It's not a team, but it's a practice. And things that you practice, you have to continue practicing them. You'll always get a bit better, but for instance, you go to baseball practice or football or martial arts practice, play practice, you name it. These are all things that over time you're going to get better at. Going in and saying, we're going to have a DevOps team, and in 6 months we're going to do DevOps because that is the amount of time and energy and money we can allocate to it. And at the end of 6 months, we will have DevOps. Doesn't work. It's a journey. It's a process. It's learning. And there's a lot of good things that can happen along the way if you do it right. It's also a partnership. I mentioned a few moments ago shared ownership in a project that I'd worked on. And DevOps is a partnership between the stakeholders, between developers, architects, testing, operations, tech support. All of these different people or groups roles that are working together in order to deliver value to your customers. So how about some technology misconceptions? These are things that are not DevOps. DevOps isn't about technology. DevOps is delivering value to your customer quickly. You can do DevOps with Post-it notes. You keep track of things with a Post-it note, and that very well might be able to help you organize and determine what sort of speed bumps that you want to look at first, what sort of things that you want to attempt to correct first. DevOps isn't about the tools either. I've lost track of the number of times, I mentioned Dice earlier where, it listed, you'll do this tool, that tool, that tool. But on LinkedIn, all the time I'm seeing things like top 20 tools for DevOps, or in order to do DevOps, you have to use these tools. No, you don't. It's not about the tools. It's about delivering value. And if you can deliver value with Post-it notes, then use the Post-it notes, because you can do that right now. You aren't going to have this 6 to 18 month to 36 month project to do DevOps. You can be doing DevOps now. I had the opportunity in my career to work with a number of people who were, let's say, refugees from Bell Labs. And they had a concept there that I thought was really neat and powerful called load, fire, aim. Do a quick test. Throw something against the wall. See if it works. Rather than sitting there and going through this exhaustive process, you might be able to solve it in 10 minutes. And if you can, great. If you can't, you've spent 10 minutes. And in the scheme of things, you could have walked across and gone to the bathroom and gotten back, or gone and gotten coffee in 10 minutes. You've at least tried something. But what should DevOps be? DevOps is all about people and communication and working together. In order to be able to do our projects, we need to interact with people. The most important skill in IT is not solving problems. It's not learning things quickly. It's communication. If you can't communicate effectively with people, then that needs to be your goal. And, at the end of the day, technology is all ones and zeros. It's pretty simple stuff. All right, so yeah, it's complex, but at least, with it being ones and zeros and with there being manuals for it, you can usually figure things out. People, however, people are a lot harder. Tools in DevOps are a means to an end. If you have a tool and it is not enabling you to deliver value more quickly to your customer, get rid of it. It is just costing you time and energy and money. So let's talk a little bit about processes. Processes are important. They're very important. When I was younger and less experienced, I used to view processes as being things that kept me from getting work done. As I've gotten some more gray hairs, I've come to realize that, definitely there are reasons for having processes. If nothing else, they make sure that everybody can communicate effectively, that things are done reliably and repeatably. Well, definitely repeatably. Reliably, it depends on the process. But DevOps isn't about the status quo. Just because something's been done that way for 300 million years doesn't mean that it is necessarily something that's good. Find better ways of doing it. DevOps isn't about automation. Automation can help you deliver value, yes. But again, if you are focusing on automating things and spending a year setting up automation, where if you had and I'm going back to the wall of Post-it notes here, but if you had your Post-it notes and you could deliver value tomorrow, then that's what you should be doing. Start with low-hanging fruit. Get a quick win. If you can deliver wins to people, you are going to get them to want to adopt DevOps and get them excited. Everybody likes to have a win. DevOps isn't fast. It's a journey. It's a process. It's something that takes a good bit of time. And if you try to set up external time frames for it, then it's just not going to work. It will fail. And then, it'll be yet another initiative where somebody came in playing buzzword bingo and it failed. Was speaking to some people yesterday about how there's other initiatives that are going on. Like there's one company that wants to decrease its carbon footprint by 10% every year, and for their IT practices. And having external imposed timeframes and goals, especially if they are imposed by somebody who really doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't work real well. They tried that in the 30s in the Soviet Union. And having a 5-year plan that said, we're going to have this production level, this production level, this production level, didn't really work out real well for them at that time. And you see it repeated again and again in organizations today. DevOps is not a magical silver bullet. Just because you're doing DevOps doesn't mean that you're immediately going to have all your ills and panacea taken care of. Organizations are made up of people. And if you have people problems, no amount of technology is going to solve the people problems, whether they be communication, whether it be change management. One of the reasons that many DevOps initiatives fail is because of managing change. People hate change. Having a development team that you have informed that, oh yeah, now you also have these other responsibilities, Doesn't go over very well a lot of times. Now, if you work with them and say, okay, yes, there is this extra responsibility, but we are going to enable you. We are going to make it so that you can do your job better, faster. I worked one place in the mid to late noughts where it could take 9 months to get a terabyte of disk space for a SAN. Or, if you wanted a server, it would take 6 to 9 months. And you would have to go through numerous meetings and justifications and so forth, where so much staff time was spent, 5 to 10 times the cost of the thing you were wanting was spent because you had to jump through all the hoops. That's a process problem. That's a people problem. No amount of technology is going to fix that. But, if you enable your development teams, and I'm using development as an umbrella, I'm including testing here, I'm including architects, the whole kit and caboodle from product through to delivery. If you enable them and let them get their job done more quickly and easily and better, then it's going to make things for the organization as a whole so much better. And you'll have happier employees because, hey, wow, I can actually get something done. It's really frustrating having to wait, because I've got to wait on, a sign off for something that costs $1,000. Most staff time in a lot of organizations is anywhere from $100 to $150 an hour when you look at the total compensation or more. And so, by having somebody wait a day, you spent that $1,000. So what can be? DevOps is about change. Change hurts. People don't like change. Being able to manage change effectively is one of the main things that you have to have in order to do DevOps effectively. And the key to being able to manage change is communication. DevOps is all about communication. DevOps is about repeatability and reproducibility. Where you might decide to have automation is to ensure that there is repeatability and reproducibility. One project or team that I worked with at one point was wondering why I was scripting some things and going through and making them so that there was an automated process. They were like, it's repeatable. We have a checklist. We have a set of commands to type in. And I'm like, no, that's not repeatable. You're going to miss something. You're going to misspell something. You're going to skip a step. And we went back and forth on this. And about 3 weeks later, some of the people on the team came to me and said, okay, you were right. Just having a checklist isn't enough. So having repeatability, having reproducibility. How many times have you heard somebody say, but it worked on my laptop, or it worked in dev? By having things such as infrastructure as code, by being able to mimic an environment using containers in the small on a laptop, you are going to make things more reproducible. Now, it is not exactly the same as prod, but even if it only works 80% the same as prod, you're still going to find and catch more things early on in the cycle rather than waiting for them to happen later. And DevOps takes time to do right. Some of it's learning time. Some of it's implementation time. A lot of it is people time. Going in and working with people, helping to manage their expectations, helping them to see and learn the advantages of empowerment. Now, with great power comes great power bills. And AWS wants you to have those great power bills. Microsoft probably does as well. But again, for everything has a cost. And DevOps, in order to do it right, takes time. It's not something, like I've said, that you can start out and 6 months later, we're doing DevOps. No, it takes time. And it's going to happen differently in every organization. It's not a one-size-fits-all hat or t-shirt or what have you. Anybody ever try on the one-size-fits-all t-shirts or hats? Do they really fit? Not really. Some people have done the one-size-fits-most, which is a little more honest, but still, it's not quite truth in advertising. DevOps, at the end of the day, is about reliability. There's another talk that I've given, the 3 R's of DevOps, and they are repeatability, reproducibility, and reliability. By being able to have repeatability and reproducibility, you can be much further along the path to having reliable systems. DevOps is a philosophy. It's not something you can learn from a book. That said, I have written a book, tongue in cheek, but it's a series of practices, just one-liners, things to think about. DevOps isn't easy. It takes a lot of time, it takes effort, it takes work. If for no other reason, then most IT folk are not the best communicators in the world. And I say this having been a person who used to be left chained up in the corner and not allowed to talk to customers. And, over a number of years and working and focusing on people stuff, I have found that I am a lot more effective. DevOps isn't about extra work. I had mentioned that I've seen teams where they're like, you want us to do what on top of everything else that we do? And it's not about extra work. It's about shared responsibility, shared ownership, and empowerment that can happen as you take on a little bit more responsibility. Now you can have teams that can build out their architecture. It'll take a little bit of time. It'll take some learning. But now they are able to get resources as needed. There still needs to be governance. And I'm not saying it's the wild, wild west. But as people are empowered, they're going to be a lot happier. DevOps doesn't have gurus. There is no one true guru, God, speaker, prophet of DevOps. It's all something that you're going to have to figure out yourself. That said, however, I am available to speak at conferences and users groups and so forth. And I'm happy to share things that I have learned along my way of learning DevOps. So how can it be? We've seen what is. We've seen some of how it should be. So let's shift gears and come back around to how it can be. DevOps is learned by doing. Just sitting and reading a book will give you some ideas, but how many people learn to program by reading a book and not actually writing code? Not actually making syntax errors, not even making errors in logic. I can remember the first time I encountered something akin to a fence post error, or off by one error, some people will call it. And that was several decades ago. And I remember it very, very well. Or another thing where it took me 3 months, and I was a teenager at the time, to figure out a bug in a game that I was having, where it said that it had drawn 30 sprites on the screen, but I only saw 20. And it wasn't until I was talking to somebody 3 months later about it that it finally clued up. And I realized, oh, wait, I wasn't checking to see if it was already occupied. These are the things that by doing, we learn. These are the things that stick with us. These are the lessons, and they're hard lessons, and they take time and effort, but it's not something that you can just tomorrow say that you are a DevOps person. It's a journey. It's a path. For myself, I say that I've been practicing DevOps for a while, but I don't know that unless it's somebody who just is totally not an IT person. You run into somebody and, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do this. But no, I'm practicing DevOps. I'm getting better, hopefully learning some things along the way. But it's done by doing. And it takes a lot of hard work. It's not something that is easy because it's about change. It's about changing how we do things. It's about changing what we do. And change is hard. But at the same time, it's about empowerment and empowering people to be able to deliver value quickly. In general, people that we work with want to do the right thing. They want to be able to, have something that they can say, hey, I did this, and have a good feeling about it. By empowering your people, you are going to have happier employees, happier coworkers. And I don't know about you, but having been on some death march projects or places where I felt like I couldn't do anything, I'd much rather work someplace where people are empowered and happy. DevOps at the end of the day makes me happy. Hopefully, it might make you happy as well, but makes it easier in some ways to go out and slay those dragons. So now we've gone through our journey. Our story is coming to an end, but it's really just the beginning. The DevOps journey is not something that ends. It's something that continues and goes on. And I'd like you to leave you with the thought that DevOps isn't an impossible dream. It is something that can be reached after a fashion. There's an old joke about a physicist, a mathematician, and an engineer who all want to date the same girl. And the girl's father puts her on one side of the room, puts the other three on the other against the other wall, and says to them, okay, if you want to date my daughter, here's the rules. You have to be able to get to her, but each time you move, you have the distance between you and her. The engineer immediately walks to the middle of the room. The physicist and the mathematician are like, wait, you can only go half the distance between you. You can never get to her. No, but I can reach out and grab her. DevOps is one of those things that, you might never totally get there, but you can get close enough. And that's what matters. And so a world with DevOps done right, it'll still have its problems. It'll still have its challenges. but we'll all be a lot more happy in what we do in our day-to-day careers. Any questions?
I was curious about like I've heard it referred to as like DevOps in code, as a developer. It's like an interface, and SRE is the implementation. Um, do you think like having a SRE team is okay? Just it's not, as long as it's not called DevOps, or is it? Is there still more to know about, like, is this really something we shouldn't even have SREs, and that everyone should, because it's a culture, everyone should be able to take this on and things like that?
That's a really good question. So I will start off by saying that I am a jack of all trades by choice. I've wanted to be a Renaissance person since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And yet, there are things that I don't have time or energy or spoons to learn. We're all going to have some level of specialization. Now, having a team that has a broad skill set that is able to, in order to do 80% of a thing, it's been said that you need to know 20% of it. Having a bunch of 80%ers with a couple SMEs to help, with the hard part, or if you're doing Kubernetes, the dark magic, and offering the proper sacrifices to the computer gods. I think you will have a much more productive team. Now, having cross-training is also important with that. Mm-hmm. Having an SRE team, I'm of two minds. Management always wants to have some name or title that they can give. HR is even worse about it. And so, having that nomenclature, because as humans, we want to categorize things. We want to have a convenient box for putting things into. And I get it. And the thing I like about SREs is that it really instills that sense of ownership. If your stuff is broke, you fix it before you write anything new. Unless it's determined to be, well, that's a bug we can live with for now. But, the for nows tend to add up, and then you're back to having tech debt. But
I think what you said about having subject matter experts makes sense to me. I always thought that from the business context, but thinking about it from a technology one, or not, maybe tech's the right word, but it's like more, mm-hmm. I have people that are really good at infrastructure as code, knowing how to use tools like Terraform or something like that has been really beneficial to the teams, where not everyone can have that same depth of knowledge. But I liked what you said about like the maintenance-driven development kind of concept, where you wish they had more ownership of not just building the feature, but supporting it, and having that kind of a culture where that kind of improvement. And that's the part that I feel lacks a lot of the time, is not in small group teams very often, but in much larger organizations, a big problem, I think. But
yeah, I've seen way too many times of, developers write the code, throw it over the wall, and it's done. Yeah. They don't have to come back and look at it. Fortunately, that's happening less. But the thing that I like about it is, with a shared sense of ownership on a team, people are working together, and you don't have or you have less of, or potential for less of, say, the antagonism between testing and development. A certain amount of friction can be good, because they both have two different goals. The goal of coding or development is to add new features. the goal of testing and the goal of operations are to minimize risk. But having a group where there's a shared responsibility for having both features and less risk, I think is the ideal world. Is it something that's necessarily easily achievable? No. It needs to be something that KPIs and OKRs are aligned with. Again, I've seen organizations and been at organizations where the KPIs for infrastructure and operations where they were only allowed a certain amount of downtime per month or per year. And the developers who were writing the code and deploying it didn't have that KPI. So there wasn't that shared sense of ownership and people working together. I use the term DevOps, but it's really not a good term because it's a philosophy. It's not it is to a degree a set of practices. It is to a degree a set of things to do or to, ways of doing things. But I tend to be very, very pragmatic about it. I'll go back to my Post-it notes. Find what works now. All right, don't do that to the sole exception that you're not looking ahead, because you can code yourself into a corner. But, don't create a huge initiative before tipping your water or your toe in the water and finding out how cold it is or what sort of commitment it's going to take. Too many people, kick off these huge initiatives and not really understand why or what they're trying to do. I kind of rambled, but I hope I got there.
Thanks, I appreciate
that.
Yeah, Matt, we have one question.
Anyone else?
Chat. Yeah, we have one question from the chat. How do you convince people that DevOps is not a technology?
Well, there's these things called clue sticks or clue by forests and repeated application. No. It's a struggle for me. It is one of those things that sometimes I feel like Don Quixote, that I'm tilting at windmills by, telling people, no, it's not a technology. Yes, you may use technology to achieve your end result, but technology and tools are a means. They are not the end. There's a book by Gene Kim called The Phoenix Project that introduces the concept of the three ways. And a lot of my understanding and beliefs about DevOps revolve around the three ways. The first way is removing barriers to delivering value. Find the speed bump, smooth it out. Then you're going to be able to deliver value to your customers more quickly. The second way is fast feedback loops. The closer to the creation of a problem that you can identify the problem, the faster and easier it's going to be and less expensive it's going to be to fix. A good example of that would be the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, where they didn't catch that there was a certain type of wind that blew through the Tacoma Narrows. And so they had the bridge that's doing this and shook itself to pieces. Back during Y2K, the Navy was looking at decommissioning entire families of ships because they had chips for encryption and for other things, that the algorithms were hard-coded on the chips and the chips were wrong, and the chips would all have to be redesigned, replaced, reproduced, etc. So, in that case, they did not even have it on the radar for it to be a possibility. The third way, and Gene Kim refers to it as a culture that allows or encourages play and experimentation. I actually prefer to call it continuous improvement. Because if you say, okay, we've done the first way, we've removed barriers, and we've got fast feedback loops, and now we're going to experiment and play. Well, you may have other roadblocks. You may have other barriers to delivery. So it needs to be a continuous process that goes around and around. Now, experimentation might be part of your continuous delivery. Oftentimes it will be, because you're going to find new and better ways of doing things. But the three ways and the concepts of the three ways of being pragmatic about it are two things, or they're things that have really shaped my understanding of the journey that is DevOps. Because at the end of the day, if you're not delivering value to a customer, you may as well close down your company, because you're going to run out of money real quick. And you may find that a tool will help you get there, but it's not about the tools. It's about delivering value. Any others? I guess, real quick summary. It's a struggle to try and convince people. Some people are so focused on the tools that they don't see the forest for the trees. They're so close to it that they have not been able to step back and look. There's the philosophy of DevOps, you might almost call it a meta IT. You step back and it's a meta level. Of course, you might also consider good algorithms to be meta, or even design patterns. But I have my own issues with design patterns. Mainly that, you'll start talking about a project, and before you even look at the problem, before you even identify, we have this input and we want this output, because IT, we're always having input and we have an output. You'll have people that go, okay, we have a new project, we're going to use this design pattern, we're going to use that design pattern, we're going to use this one and that one. And J2EE or JEE, Java Enterprise Edition, was designed to support infinitely scalable problems and solutions. There are very, 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 very few problems that any organization will experience that requires an infinite solution or infinitely scalable solution. So I fear that while design patterns were a good idea to have a common language for describing how you might implement a solution, people have focused on them to the extent of not really saying, well, what do we really need here? Do we need a Corvette, or will a 1953 Beetle do what we need? So I have some strongly held opinions, as do most people. But Anything else? Well, if you were paying attention, there were more than 10 things wrong. Or 10 things that DevOps isn't. And again, I'll plug the 3 ways. This talk should be on the net in a previous form. I will send a link to it. I mentioned the 3 R's of DevOps, the Phoenix project, and a few other things. The 3 R's of DevOps is slides from a talk that I had given, my first Ignite talk. And if you're familiar with Ignite, it's 20 slides. They auto advance every 15 seconds. And I came up with the topic, the 3 R's of DevOps. And I'm like, okay, 3 R's? All right. School, reading, writing, arithmetic, blackboards. So I sat down and I hand drew on black paper all 20 slides. And between practicing my lettering, because all the different lettering styles that I used on the 20 slides were different, and coming up with designs and writing out my script and memorizing it and so forth and so on, I spent 60 hours on a 5-minute talk. It was a little obsessive and excessive, but despite all of that, it still has value to this day, and it was 8 years ago. Wow. Scary to think about that. But I would encourage people to come and talk at users groups. Even if it's only 5 to 10 minutes. Hey, this is a library I found, and it's neat because XYZ. I like it. I think it might be helpful for you. Or, hey, have you heard about this new concept? Here's the 5-minute thing about it. As a organizer and former organizer of groups, they're always looking for people to speak. Always, always. And you don't have to, be up here and talk for an hour. They're perfectly happy for you to, talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And, that 5 to 10 minutes might actually help, somebody else who's at the users group to point them towards the solution for the problem they've been fighting for 3 weeks. And then you've made a friend. And maybe someday when you're looking for your next gig, your friend might remember you and help you get the gig. So, it's all people stuff. Everything that we do in IT is related to people. It's a problem that some person is having. So if you look at it from the sense of people stuff, in the long run, you'll go further in your career. So, off soapbox, thank you much for having me. And I really enjoyed being able to speak with you all. And I'm shortly going to go have some breakfast.
Well, thank you so much, Matt.
We
really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Especially with the time zone change, we appreciate your willingness to speak to us anyway. That's awesome. There's a link in the chat for all the attendees. So if you could fill out that form, I'll leave that open for 24 hours for feedback. And at that point, I'll close the survey and then get you the summary of the results, Matt.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. So for those that are curious, India time, they don't do daylight savings, but they are GMT or UTC plus 5.5. And it's the half that's really throwing me off. So, so for Eastern Standard Time right now, it's 10.5 hour difference.
Is that the difference throughout the country, or do they have time zones as well?
Nope. India has one time zone.
Oh, okay.
Now, China also has one time zone. And China stretches a fair bit wider east to west than India does. But they decided that they didn't want to deal with time zones. So it's all the same time there.
Yeah.
But
I'm not sure how that works in the East.
Yeah, between, over towards Mongolia and then, the Beijing.
That's quite a hike.
It is. It definitely is. But time zones are another thing that I have strong opinions about. Had an incident once where a manager, and this was for enterprise system management system. So, we're doing alerting based off of logs and so forth. A manager calls us up and is upset because it took an hour for them to get their page. And, we look at it and it's like, no, you got it within 5 minutes or less. But it says, 12 o'clock. It's like 1 o'clock now. Why did it take so long? Like, look at the time zone. We wanted everything to go in as UTC, but you didn't want that because time zones were too hard. UTC was too hard for you. But I run into that so many times. I imagine other people have too. But at least for a lot of IT folk, I think that COVID and so many meetings over video and things like that have really made it easier for IT folk to understand time zones in UT.
Mm-hmm.
But still, there are so many horror stories that I could tell over the years. But again, thank you for having me.
Okay.
And I will be back in February speaking on sustainability, agile, sustainable IT. And let me just really quickly plug again the Sustainable IT Manifesto. You can see the link down in the lower right corner of the slides. And it is something that I'm very passionate about and want to encourage people to take a look at, because you don't have to be management to do sustainability. Making good choices for how you write your code will do it. And actually, the 3 ways and DevOps map really, really, really well to grassroots driven sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you very much. And have a great day, everybody.